2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute.
President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump. Both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class. The small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction. Which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion. Trump sales tax would actually result for middle class families in about $4,000
Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before. Probably the worst in our nation's history. But that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for we have to get our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan on Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing before elected to get. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president and other parties of bringing us to recognize the source of our economic situation, and I pledge to take this
Makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes versus I agree with
Yes, Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So, Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. Just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan. It was a tariff up to 20%. Then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas. Do you believe in that?
For years, I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars to sell our country. And you know, he is
China, what he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military. Basically, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at this tweet. Thank you, President Xi. He was
Mother's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, pouring in, and just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals, and that's big for our economy too. by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 90s is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born. Is okay. And that's not okay with me. That's the vote. But when I come to something for 52 years, I've been trying to make more hands on the perspective. And one thing we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in that. 85% of Republicans are exceptions. Very important. But for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It's a privilege to do it. And this is great courage in doing it. And I gave tremendous time to the sex justices. There's no state in this country where this legal control Donald Trump that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, and two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, and that is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion laws. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare necessities, whose children America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her body, and that is why in every city where this issue has been on the women won't stand for the people of America.
I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 85%, 95% of the
Migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record.
Because he proceeded who said fix it. Okay. About immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something
thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to them. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there. And then showing them a different way. So she can talk about that. Incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is free. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in the country. And it's they want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase. Make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, will end up being those stimulus.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there had been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
The people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
say the
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that live there.
This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the republic would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who were taking care of the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. Let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. You call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common state criminals. They allowed people to come and drug things. Her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is
but they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they couldn't turn out to use.
Crimes, election interference has been found liable to sexual assault November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear, where each person stands on the issue of what is important for felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people. Address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for. Address what we must do to support our community.
Opponent, and I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them, but those are cases. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ from Atlanta and Sandy he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice
To
President.
stop him.
Lindsay.
Vice President Harris, trying for president. Wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well, first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. She went out, wait a minute, I'm talking. People that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to choice because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they can't. 400, 500 acres. There's
our democracy and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. But the country and the world saw a play out of the Capitol and the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television in the Oval Office. It did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before we sent out that video. Percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted? Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be very big.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital. to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were 5 people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys abolition, the president said the former president said stand up and stand by. So for everyone in January, members of January 6th members, I say, we have to go back. Let's go back. Let's take
They've destroyed our energy business. That was where Bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through the southern border? But she's not doing anything. And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see it go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to resistance of Madison, ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and leave some of that money to close up the border, because they have the right to do that.
And world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom work with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way, in a presidential debate and dilemma, then all of
He said, because you need Trump back as president. horribly raped. And so, absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this
end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel winning equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity that so badly deserve. President
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America? Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. Watching America's #1 live. the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir, Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so. It remains in the moment of moving forward in the other countries. We have said that we fought this war in 24 months since the last war today. And we fought now without
I'll speak to one side to the other.
until the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania, how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you for both of you. Great to know Afghanistan came up in the last I'd like to respond to something you said earlier. And please, I'll give you a minute. Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't even estimate what that is. But he would have been sitting in Moscow. He would have been sitting in Moscow, watching a bad news with you. But eventually, he was going to find me. And the people who gave us that nickname that we tend to talk about, that nickname that we call the United States. And eventually, we realized that we was a big thing to be people. And it's something we never need to talk about. We didn't need to talk about it. But just so you understand, last night you were to negotiate peace with Israel. 4 days later, you went in and you started the war. Because everything they said was that the Brits stupid. They said the Brits played for them. She didn't never said it. She was the embassy. We said you need to negotiate with her. So let's get it. And she did. And the war slowly put us in. And that's the community. She's worse than bad. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of the country. She knows that. He's the worst vice president in the history of the country. Let me tell you something. She is a negotiator. They said you need to negotiate. So is then the invasion. President Trump, would you like to say something about such an intervention? What's what's when I went to meet with President Zelensky, the reality is it is really about something that as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent
and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris.
Abdul was the head of the company. He's still the head of the company. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You send me a picture of my house. I said, you're going to have to get that. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have a negotiated by Mark Pompeo. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out the soldiers. We wouldn't have left kids behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black." I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Time's up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on
to
to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now your
Yeah.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Right.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it could be? Never going to be great. Or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something. I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time. When I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
Made a mistake. And number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who you also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Baywatch is a fantasy. Baywatch is sexy.
Central on ABC. Nominations, mornings, evenings, late night, weekends, streaming 24/7, 40 Emmy nominations. Thank you for making ABC News America's #1 news.
Get ready, America, every Friday. The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff. Yes! And save big time, too. The right stuff. Fridays on TMA. You're going to love it.
This is Impact by Medline.
Are you kidding me? My sense was that everybody around him was afraid of him. Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
What's going on with Pete?
What is the relationship like between Harry and William today? what did people start to say?
You look great. Are you on Ozempic?
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done. She talks about tough love and harsh punishment. No, it's abuse. I think Scott Peterson murdered his wife and his child. Prove me wrong.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
Yep, that's him.
Ready? Does your church protect sexual predators?
How do you top the most watched season yet?
Fabulous.
It's a bit erotic, a bit exotic.
You have no idea.
Impact by Redline. The all-new season premieres this September, only on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you? I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense? Andrew?
I'm not going to say we're Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't spell Chase Stadium. 1985? I think we could have. Let's go.
We are heading into the unknown.
Oh my gosh.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Reporting from the floor of the Republican National Convention, I'm Rachel Scott. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question.
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And we are here live on ABC with our post-debate comments. I'm Martha Raddatz. It was a lively debate from the economy to abortion to Afghanistan. They had it all, and it was historic, John Carl, fiery.
Wow. Wow. That was quite a debate. And I'm Jonathan Carl here with, of course, Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott. Our reporters across the news division have been updating our live blog, looking at some of the allegations made back and forth, doing fact checks. You can find all of that on abcnews.com. But I would like to replay the moment at the very start of this debate, because it was quite a moment. The handshake. And if you look,
It's a good debate. Thank you.
I mean, quite a moment. First of all, because we hadn't seen a handshake. We hadn't seen a handshake in a long time.
She initiated that one.
And
Yeah, she did.
not only did she initiate it, she walked over to him and sought him out, put the hands out, and also made the first words.
And probably had a plan if he hadn't put his hand out either.
Interesting. So Martha, bottom line, what did you think?
I think clearly what Kamala Harris wanted to do was be the candidate of hope, the candidate of the future. Donald Trump seemed angry within 4 minutes. I think we saw him going from very serious at the beginning, never really seemed to look at her, to just angry. I mean, really yelling at some points, trying to make his points. I don't think we heard a lot of policy and plans on either side of that, despite those questions over and over again. But what you had was that optic. You had Kamala Harris looking over, baiting him again and again and again. The microphones were muted when they weren't speaking, but many times she didn't need a microphone. You watch Donald Trump get mad, scowl through things. And, John, we were all talking leading up to this about how this would go, what Donald Trump you would see. I think he had a plan for talking about what he saw as a next term, but then he was talking about rumors about people eating their neighbors' pets. So it really devolved into that.
I mean, look, Kamala Harris didn't really explain some of the big questions that were out there about why she changed her policy views on so many things. Part of the reason is Donald Trump really was not effective in bringing the debate to her. I agree with you. I think that he looked not just angry, but also rattled. And in contrast, Harris, who again, much of the world doesn't know, Harris looked like she belonged on the stage, looked like she is somebody that could serve as president.
And that is certainly how the campaign is feeling tonight. I can tell you, the Harris campaign feels very good. They feel they had a very strong night, that she was in command, that she did look presidential, and that she was able, they feel, to hold Donald Trump accountable for his actions. And of course, that was their goal going into this, that she would be able to put Donald Trump's record under a microscope. And they feel that the strongest example of that was that exchange on abortion, where she was able really to blame Donald Trump directly to his face. I mean, she said, what you are putting women through is
unconscionable. Yes, she goaded him. She flat out trolled him many times, got him off message, but she also talked directly to voters, even inviting them to a Trump rally to underscore that central argument in her campaign that she says he's only out for himself, that she argues she's out for the American people.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, look, the Trump campaign is going to be seizing on the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris did not do a great job today really explaining her policy shifts, right? And that is what they have been seizing on. They're really trying to define her for voters when voters have a lot of questions about her policy positions. At the same time, though, almost every single thing that Vice President Kamala Harris said tonight got under Trump's skin. And that is exactly what his allies and his advisors did not want to see. I can tell you, I do not think that part of Donald Trump's debate prep was people eating dogs in Springfield or comparing rally sizes. They wanted him to stay focused on the issues, especially the ones that he has an edge on: Harris, economy and immigration.
I mean, you want to get under Donald Trump's skin, you question the people at his rallies. And that was something else. Martha, you have?
I have with us right now Governor Tim Walz, of course, the Democratic vice presidential candidate. Welcome, Governor Walz. How are you feeling? What's your reaction to the debate tonight?
Martha, I'm feeling great because what I knew, and I think so many knew, and now many Americans know, is you saw a president for all America in Kamala Harris. You saw the confidence, you saw the vision, you saw the poise, and you saw the compassion for people, understanding she spoke about an economy that moves us forward, moves all of us forward, lets everybody be a part of it. And she continued to lay that out, whether it's reproductive freedom or how we start small businesses or making home ownership easier. And on the other side, you saw a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump, angry, unhinged, and as you've been discussing, talking about things that are deeply concerning because they make no impact on the American public. He shouldn't be anywhere near the White House. And I have to tell you, if it weren't so dangerous, it reminds you of an old man yelling at the clouds. That was his thing. Get off my yard. That's what he did all night. Contrast that with the place of Harris laying out the conclusion for everything that matters. And so I think the whole country can see what happened tonight. We'll keep pushing forward. That's the way that the country wants to see our politics be. She laid it out clearly. Donald Trump brought nothing tonight. Anger, resentment.
Governor Walz, I do want to ask you, she did not answer questions on abortion restriction. She never really answered that question. Can you clear that up where the Harris-Walz ticket stands on that?
Certainly, and you couldn't get any different than this. The reinstitution of Roe versus Wade, what was the law of the land for 52 years. You saw this in there, and him pushing back to the states. She's exactly right. It's people like Amanda in Texas, which everybody saw on the stage in Chicago, nearly bleeding out, having sepsis twice because she can't get the care. She's been absolutely clear on this. Everything Donald Trump said, that is untrue. The clarity of this is Roe. When you have Roe, you have the protections in place where women make their own decisions with their healthcare providers, not Donald Trump.
Okay, thanks so very much for joining us, Governor Walz. John?
And we have the other side of the ticket. We have Senator J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, joining us now. Senator Vance, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
So I want to get to one part of the debate where you came up. Donald Trump was asked if he would veto a national abortion ban. He didn't answer the question, suggested, I guess, that he wouldn't. And then it was pointed out that you, in fact, said not that long ago that he would veto a national abortion ban. Can you explain the mix-up here?
Well, I think the president's been very clear that he doesn't want a national abortion ban. I think in some ways he finds the question a little bit ridiculous because why are we asking him about legislation that's never going to actually happen and why he would veto it or not veto it when he says very explicitly that he doesn't support a national abortion ban and he wants these policies to be made by the states. But I think there's a deeper and more important issue here in this debate, which is that you had Kamala Harris effectively echoing platitude after platitude after platitude. The American people can't pay their grocery bills on platitudes. They can't put their kids in a house on platitudes. And Kamala Harris had a lot to say, but very little actual substance behind it for how she's going to lower grocery prices, secure the border, and make housing more affordable in this country. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She can't run on a record, and she apparently can't run on much of her plans either because it's just a lot of slogans and not a whole lot of substance.
But Senator Vance, why won't he just say that he would veto the national abortion ban? And by the way, had you spoken to him about it before you were put in a position to answer that question?
No, I hadn't spoken to him about it because, again, Donald Trump thinks the question is absurd because he doesn't support a national abortion ban, and he's been explicit about it. And, John, I think that it's so preposterous for the media to focus so much on an issue where Donald Trump has been crystal clear and not on the fact that people can't afford groceries and housing because of Kamala Harris's policies. This election is actually quite simple, and Kamala Harris and apparently the media would like to distract Americans on issues, by the way, that Donald Trump's been crystal clear about, but they're not talking nearly enough. This debate didn't talk nearly enough about the fact that Americans are struggling because they can't afford groceries, they can't afford housing, and a lot of their kids are dying of fentanyl overdoses because Kamala Harris has let the Mexican drug cartels take over the southern border. This is a disgrace what's going on in our country, John, and we could do so much better if we just had better leadership. We've got the best workers, the most beautiful country, the best natural resources, but Kamala Harris's leadership is squandering the great benefits of this country. It's why we've got to get back to Donald Trump's leadership.
Senator, by the way, I asked because he hadn't been crystal clear and he said something different than what you said. That's why I was seeking clarification. But let me ask you about this. Just very quickly. I heard Donald Trump before this debate describe Kamala Harris as, I'll just read a few of them, a low IQ individual, somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity to be president, really dumb, unable to put two sentences together. Is that what you saw on the stage tonight?
John, what I saw was a lot of slogans. I think the American people are smart, and Kamala Harris talks to them like they're children. She repeats these ridiculous platitudes where if you actually think about what she said, you realize that it doesn't make any sense. She talks a lot about her plans, but then her plans, when you analyze the substance, don't make any sense. And more importantly, John, the American people don't get fed on plans. She has been the vice president for 3.5 years. What she can't do, refuses to do, and has no ability to do is to say, I accomplished lower prices because she didn't, or I accomplished lower housing prices because she didn't, or I secured the southern border because she didn't do that. She has failed as vice president. And the fundamental question is, do we want to give her a promotion? I think the answer has to be no, John.
All right. Senator Vance, thank you for joining us. Mary.
One thing both sides can agree on, this was a consequential night in this race. More reaction when we come back. Stay with us.
Continue your legacy and lead America's classrooms. Find your purpose. Visit gcu.edu/heroes.
Here's how I run a multi-six-figure social media management business as a team of one without wasting my precious time chasing invoices, onboarding clients, or doing unnecessary busy work. As a business owner, it's important to lean into your strengths and do the things that only you can do. And my best secret is using HoneyBook for the rest. With HoneyBook, discovery calls are booked on autopilot through lead forms. Client onboarding and offboarding is done effortlessly through automations, and their contract templates help me get paid on time and keep projects in scope. Plus, delivering an exceptional client experience keeps my clients coming back, and HoneyBook helps me do just that. First impressions matter in business. You want to make sure your social media management business looks as polished and professional as you really are. And it's easier than you think. Start a free trial so you can see for yourself.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. All the exclusive and buzziest celebrity good stuff. Deals and steals with amazing savings and the coolest coolest lifestyle tips from Good Morning America.
I love that so much.
GMA Light, streaming weekends on ABC News Live. Your weekend just got a little better with GMA Light.
Traveling with the president in Paris, I'm Mary Bruce. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Let's go. The ship is incredible.
On For a Killer, only on Hulu.
We're back now here at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia and with Chris Christie. So, Governor Christie, you heard the debate, remarkable debate. Bottom line, what'd you think?
She was exquisitely well prepared. She laid traps and he chased every rabbit down every hole instead of talking about the things that he should have been talking about. This is the difference between someone who's well prepared and someone who's unprepared. Whoever did debate prep for Donald Trump should be fired. He was not good tonight at all. And what Harris did was what she had to do, which was to prove that she belonged on that stage. She has a voice that wants to try to unite the country. And Donald Trump spent more time talking about people eating pets, people at his rallies, and whether he had more or less than he did about the economy. And that is a huge fail tonight. I think what we're going to see is that Kamala Harris is now being seen by a lot of voters as a potential president. That's what she needed to accomplish tonight. Trump better get to work or he's going to lose this election.
Characteristically blunt assessment from Governor Chris Christie. Thank you, Governor. Mary?
All right, let's go to former DNC Chair Donna Brazile. So, Donna, you have certainly studied many a debate in your career. How does this one compare?
I think it was one of the best debate performances I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot, and I've helped a lot of people prepare for these big moments. She met the moment. She seized the opportunity to tell the American people what she would do during her 4 years. She commanded the issues, and she did not allow the former president to bait her. Instead, she led the way forward. She turned the page, and I think this race is about to get even more interesting now.
We will see if it moves the needle, Donna. Thank you.
All right, over to the other side now. Former RNC Chair Reince Priebus. All right, Reince, the Harris campaign says they want another debate. If you were advising the Trump campaign, would you tell them to do it?
Sure, I would tell him to do it. And the reason is like I said before, Donald Trump's numbers just don't move. I mean, the reality tonight, I know Donna's excited, but the truth is Kamala Harris didn't address the most important thing that the American people care about, which is the economy and the cost of living. She had no answers on immigration. She had no answers when she was asked about defunding the police. She had nothing to say about the families that were lost in Afghanistan, which was a true layup. She should have been fact-checked a lot more on some of the things she said in regard to this comment about a bloodbath, which was about the auto industry. So look, I think a lot of things were not said tonight that she needed to say in order to move the numbers. And I don't think Donald Trump's numbers move at all. They haven't moved at all for months.
Reince Priebus, Donna Brazile, both thank you for your time.
All right. Well, I got to say, again, what a incredible debate, consequential debate, no doubt. I don't know how many votes will actually be moved. I don't know how many persuadable voters are actually out there. But Kamala Harris had a chance here to introduce herself to the country, to people who know who she is, but don't know where she stands. Now, you could debate how much she did in terms of the specifics of where she stands, but she stood up there, and I think it was very significant to hear Chris Christie say that she acted like she seemed like she belonged.
Exactly, and Chris was clearly impressed with that. But to your point, John, what matters is what the voters think. Kamala Harris was hurling things against Donald Trump, and he's been convicted, and January 6th and everything else she could throw at him. But in the end, right now, he is tied with Kamala Harris. Does this change anything? We've all seen debates where people are very proud of what they did. Hillary Clinton thought she won that debate, many debates in 2016, and she didn't win. So you have to be very careful, and it's very important to see what the voters think.
And look, the Harris campaign certainly thinks that they were, they put him on the defensive. They are going to keep getting out and making this message. She's going to be out there in those critical battlegrounds again later this week. They're so optimistic. They want that second debate. As Rachel said, the message from the campaign tonight, Vice President Harris is ready for a second debate. They're looking for one in October. They say, is Donald Trump, ? One last goading of him to end the night.
Wow, that is something else. I did not predict that at the beginning. Rachel.
Bottom line, voters out there want a change. That's what the polls say. And both of these candidates really trying to present themselves as the agent of change. We will have to see in the polls who did the most effective job of doing that tonight.
We will see. All right, that is it for us here in Philadelphia. A night to remember for sure. Our race for the White House post-debate coverage continues on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, Hulu, and anywhere else you stream live news. And your local news is next.
And thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of ABC News Live, the race for the White House. I'm Whit Johnson. We are live from the spin room here in Philadelphia. You can see all the people gathering and the spin that's going on behind me after that historic face-off between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. A pivotal night in a historically close presidential race. It started with a handshake and a nice to see you, but then the candidates held nothing back. Take a look.
She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
For 90 minutes, highlighting their vast differences on everything from America's involvement in foreign wars to abortion rights and immigration. The former president promising to strengthen the economy, while Harris offered a vision for a less divided country.
We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other.
And I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger.
Our poll is showing the race still neck and neck within the margin of error, including in the battleground states. But the question on many people's minds right now is who won the night on this first and likely last face-off in the race for president. We have live team coverage from the National Constitution Center and here in the spin room. We begin with our Jay O'Brien covering it all.
Kamala Harris.
Tonight, the historic face-off. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump going head-to-head in their first and what will likely be their only debate before Election Day.
If she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. She has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window.
I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies. What you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
Trump lashing out.
She's been so bad. It's so ridiculous.
Trump in his 7th presidential debate, Harris her first.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
The candidates clashing on major issues like the economy.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy.
Abortion.
And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. She said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote.
And immigration.
I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
Harris mentioning Trump's legal woes, including 4 felony indictments and 1 conviction.
I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Trump doubling down on his lies that he won the 2020 election.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge it at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
Their differences stark, making their pitches in a race that poll after poll show is neck and neck.
The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia.
Plenty of big moments in the debate tonight. So joining us now is former Congressman Cedric Richmond, who's now co-chair for the Harris-Walz campaign. Mr. Richmond, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Heading into tonight's debate, the polls were showing that Kamala Harris still needed to tell her story, that voters wanted to know more about her and the issues and where she stood on the positions that matter to the voters. How do you think she did tonight?
Well, I think rightfully so. I think voters deserve to know the candidates that they're voting for. And I think she did an excellent job tonight, talking about not only her values, but talking about her plan for the American people. And I think that was the big difference tonight. She focused on how do I help Americans dealing with several challenges, the challenges of childcare, the challenges of affordable housing, the challenges of rising grocery prices. And I think she addressed all of that. And I think the American people are giving her a fresh look, and I think she did an excellent job.
Donald Trump, the former president, says that she's a flip-flopper. She can't be trusted because her issues have evolved so much over the years. Do you think that she properly addressed that tonight?
Absolutely. I think that she hit it direct on and talked about, for example, with fracking and healthcare. She said she wouldn't ban fracking as vice president. She didn't ban fracking, and she has no intention on banning fracking. When she talked about healthcare, she said her values was always that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege just for the rich. And she talked about how to expand healthcare. So I think she did a very good job of going into her policies and how they align with her values as growing up in a middle-class family, and how that relates to the families in the United States right now.
Another thing heading into tonight, the polls showed that voters, for the most part, trusted Trump more on some key issues like immigration and the economy. Kamala Harris did not answer the question right off the top of whether Americans are better now than they were 4 years ago before Joe Biden took office. Is that going to be a continued problem for her?
4 years ago, 50% of the schools in this country were closed. You had thousands.
Pandemic.
But 50% of the schools in this country were closed. 10 million people were out of work. You had businesses shut down. And Now you have a resurgence, 16 million jobs created, schools open. So I think what the vice president was doing, and she did a good job of doing, was articulating where we started, where we are now, and what her plans and how it would chart a new way forward. And I think she did a good job of that.
I want to go ahead and take a listen to a clip here that we prepared. This is the candidates talking about each other's policies. Let's take a listen.
I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
So that's, again, to that same narrative here, the Trump team trying to define her. Do you believe, are you confident that she's able to change this narrative going forward? Clearly, the voters still want to know more about her. They want to know where she stands. Do you think that she's going to be able to do that in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah, I think she did a great job of it tonight. And part of what a debate is, it's a compare and contrast. And I think that she talked about our values, and I think he talked about himself. He's still stuck thinking he won the 2020 election. In fact, that was the lowest point on the dials when he still rehashed that he won the election in 2020. Her highest point on the dial is when she talked about she was going to be a president for all of America, that she was going to work hard to improve the quality of life of everybody in this country. And I think that she did a great job tonight, and she's willing to keep doing it, and she's going to keep showing people who she is, and who she's fighting for, and that's the American people.
Former Congressman Cedric Richmond, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's turn now to our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, who is joining us right now. And Rachel, obviously, you've been on the campaign trail. You've been talking about the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign. One of the big issues, and there was a significant moment tonight, was the topic of abortion. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
So, Rachel, forgive me, a lot going on here in the spin room, but your takeaway on what we just heard right there. I know people with the Harris campaign are saying that was a strong moment for her.
Yeah, it looks awfully busy in that spin room behind you, and I know a lot of those surrogates there for the Harris campaign and for the Trump campaign are going to be getting questions about this because this is going to be a critical defining issue in this election. Look, abortion rights could be on the ballot in as many as 12 states, including several key battlegrounds. And this is why you have Harris, who has been the leading voice on this issue for the Biden administration, really taking it to the former president, who has been sort of all over the map on where he stands. Look, his record is clear. He appointed 3 of the 5 Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. At the same time today, when he was pressed on his stance, even what his own running mate has said, that he would veto a national abortion ban, you heard the former president not even committing to that. And so Harris does see this as a very effective line of attack, especially when you look at the polls. She still has that double-digit edge, especially in those battleground states among likely female voters with.
And one of the areas where former President Trump has struggled is connecting to those women voters, especially those who are undecided. What is the sense? How is the Trump campaign responding to how he did on that tonight?
Yeah, well, the former president's campaign insists that Harris essentially didn't necessarily go into a lot of detail about her policy positions. They continue to insist that they're doing very well among likely female voters, but they also know that this is an area that the former president has to do some work on ahead of November. And it's a reason why you're seeing the former president really turn his focus, as he tried to say in the debate tonight, toward things like IVF, and him saying that he wants the government to provide free IVF to women in this country. It's a reason why he's trying to turn the page and focus more on women's issues, because he knows that he's behind in the polls compared to Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, whether or not he did an effective job at laying that all out tonight, I think that remains to be seen. I still think that tonight the former president drifted into a lot of areas that his advisors and allies just did not want him to go into. They wanted him to stay on message. They didn't want this whole back and forth over rallies and crowd size or people who are allegedly eating pets in Ohio. They wanted him to really focus on the issues with.
All right, Rachel Scott, we're going to talk more about that right now. We appreciate it. Thank you. We're going to bring in Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. And that question, Marco, we're going to pick it up right there. We've heard from advisors and Trump campaign officials going into tonight that they were hoping that the former president would stay on the issues and stay on message. Do you believe that he accomplished that? How would you rate him tonight?
First of all, I think that Donald Trump has been running for president since 2016. He has been president. Americans have lived under the Trump presidency. He's well defined on these things. And a lot of things he said tonight, it's part of the persona. And so I think if he hadn't done some of those things, people would be watching and saying, oh, that's a different Donald Trump. It's not the same guy. I think the person with the onus tonight was Kamala Harris, who's still not very well known. And I think tonight what you take away from it and everything she says and in the days to come, what I think a lot of voters, real voters, not political pundits, not people like me, just people that are out there in the real world watching this that are going to be voting, that aren't daily political people, they're taking away from it. We don't know a lot about her. And tonight we found out she either basically is the same as Joe Biden on public policy or even potentially farther to the left, given her positions in 2019 and 2020, when she wanted to pay for the transgender surgeries of illegal migrants in detention, when she was raising money to bail out rioters. A lot of people didn't know she was doing that, where she wanted to defund ICE. Or she's just like Don. And by the way, one of the most outrageous moments tonight, she stood there and basically touted what happened in Afghanistan as a success, that it was a great success. It was a humiliation. It was a disaster. It was not a withdrawal. It was a retreat, and a costly retreat at the cost 13 American lives, cost our national prestige.
She tried to put it back on the Trump campaign in the sense that these were dates that were previously established and negotiated by the Trump administration.
If that's what she said, that's a lie. Because there was no dates that said the Taliban runs you out. What happened there basically was the Taliban forced the Afghan government that she was bragging about. It just collapsed. They just abandoned their posts. They ran us out of the country. They gave us 72 hours to get out, and we had to leave behind $90 billion worth of equipment that they were just parading around the other day. That was not a part of any Trump plan. That most certainly was not part. That was a result of the collapse of that government due to the malfeasance, malpractice of the State Department and the Department of Defense. Not a single person's been fired for it. Everybody sees it for the humiliation that it was, even Democrats. And she's bragging about it as a great success. But there's a lot more to unpack here. Tonight, for the first time, that 25% of Americans that say they wanted to learn more about her, they're beginning to learn that, in fact, she was not born on July 24th of this year. She was vice president. She's been there when 50% increases happened in our groceries bill. She's been in the White House when over 10 million people have entered this country unlawfully over the last 3.5 years.
Can I ask you about immigration? Obviously, this is something that you've spoken about, and so has the former president. Polls show that Americans, voters, at least right now, trust former President Trump more on the issue of abortion. But does it help his case when he comes out on immigration? On immigration, forgive me, on immigration. But does it help his case when he comes out and talks about things like, migrants kidnapping and eating pets in Ohio? Does that help?
Well, there's people, listen, I don't know if that's true or not true. And what he said tonight was that there are people out there putting that on social media.
Government officials have told us that.
The city manager said they had no reports of it, but there are actual people, real people who are claiming this, and that it's happening in Springfield, Ohio, that's had like an influx of 15 or 20 million migrants brought here under this parole program. And that's claims that people are making, and that's what he's pointing to. But irrespective of that, beyond it, I was just in Ohio last week and people were talking about Springfield. And what they were saying is it has been a real burden on, that same city manager, I believe, was the one that came out and said, we have a housing crisis because they flooded our community with people that were brought in under the Biden parole program. The Biden immigration program has been a complete and absolute disaster. It has led to 9 or 10 million people coming into this country unlawfully, including people they claim they vetted that turn out to be members of a very violent Venezuelan gang that is now terrorizing New York City, Chicago, parts of Florida, and Aurora, Colorado, as was pointed out tonight. She has to answer for that. She's been there when all this was happening. Why didn't they do anything about it? I was disappointed, frankly, that she was not pressed more on that, on the record of the last 3.5 years. She has not been some bystander. She has been in the White House, the second most powerful figure in this administration, when all these terrible things have happened to our country. She should have been forced to answer more for that. That said, I think that tonight, those issues, the president President Trump effectively raised those issues in the minds of a lot of undecided voters who I think are going to begin to take that into account as they fill in the blanks with who she is.
What about the issue of election integrity? Trump, again, tonight would not acknowledge the results of the 2020 election. He also, when asked multiple times if he had any regrets about January 6th, didn't answer that question. Is that going to be a problem for him?
Well, I think what he said about January 6th was that he's not responsible for what happened that evening.
You don't think he bears any responsibility for that?
I believe in individual agency. I think there were a lot of people that went to Washington to protest, and there were a handful of crazies that went in to do something they shouldn't have done. And among those, there were people that were violent and people that committed crimes. And the ones who committed violent crimes, those people should serve their sentences if you committed an act of violence. But I don't think that they did it. Donald Trump didn't tell them to go do it, and that's what he has said. I do think, on the other hand, we have to ask Democrats, what about these people that were out there excusing the rioters that were burning down American cities?
But
some of them weren't even prosecuted.
Do you have confidence that this is going to be a free and fair election, that there will be
listen, free and fair elections is one thing, but people have to have confidence in the process. For example, in the state of Georgia, they entered into a consent decree. They ignored their own laws because they entered into a consent decree and allowed a court to change their laws. And how you're allowed to vote and when and what method and so forth. And when you do that in multiple places, including here in the Commonwealth, that undermines people's confidence, especially in a close election. That's why election laws are so important. That's why they need to be followed. It's not just about getting the count right. It's about conducting an election in a way that gives everybody confidence that nothing happened that shouldn't have happened. And that didn't happen in 2020 because COVID caused a lot of states to try to create flexibility that didn't exist in statute.
But the investigations never found any examples of widespread fraud.
But it's almost impossible to find widespread fraud. But that's not the claim I've ever made. The claim is that they have not followed their own laws. And when you don't follow your own laws of election, you open the door to fraud. But more importantly, you open the door to a lack of confidence in your electoral process. When you say these are the rules and then you violate those rules, you are undermining people's confidence in the election, especially when one side comes up short by a very narrow margin. That's why election laws are so important, to protect people's confidence in the elections. That's why they're so important, and they weren't followed in 2020 in multiple jurisdictions.
All right, Senator Rubio, thank you for that. We appreciate it. Let's go ahead and head over to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, who's been talking to both campaigns. Mary, your thoughts on what we've been hearing so far from the Harris campaign?
Well, look, they certainly are absolutely thrilled with how this night turned out. They think that Kamala Harris was out there looking presidential, that she was in command, and that they feel she did, shine a spotlight on Donald Trump's record, that she was able to articulate her positions and pivot and get under Trump's skin. And look, there's no question she did successfully goad him in many instances, and they feel that she was really successful at that she threw Donald Trump off message. And it does appear, is that Donald Trump there going into the spin room, perhaps, making an entrance there as well? But Whit, I know you'll keep an eye on that. Let me know if you need to turn there. But, one of the things that's so interesting is looking ahead now, where does the Kamala Harris team go? Because so much of this comes down to whether, they can spin this how they want. Trump's team can spin this how he wants. But what it comes down to are those key independent voters. Harris is going to be out there in those key battleground states in the coming days. And they feel this was so successful. They are now asking for a second debate in October, challenging Trump to see if he will accept that debate. Maybe you can shout that question to him there, Whit. And in a final, sort of top off the night here, Taylor Swift tweeting out to her 283 million followers that she is now endorsing Kamala Harris. But that is going to be something that's hard for Trump to shake off.
Hey, Mary, forgive me. Former President Donald Trump is here in the spin room. Whenever there's an audience, we know that the former president likes to be part of it. So he has essentially taken over. And there is a scramble here on the spin room floor. Let's go to Jay O'Brien. I think you're right there in the middle of it. Jay, what's going on?
Wait, Donald Trump has just walked into the spin room here. He's walking here. Mr. Trump, we're live on ABC News here, sir. Mr. Trump. I think he's about to talk. Wait, here we go.
So we thought it was our best debate ever. It was my best debate ever, I think. And it was very interesting. It showed how weak they are, how pathetic they are, and what they're doing to destroy our country and the border with foreign trade, with everything. And I think it was the best debate I've ever personally that I've had. We're getting polls that showed 92-6, 88-11. We're having a lot of great polls that just came out. They're there are polls, I guess, phone polls and lots of other polls, but you see the polls. A very important debate. Now, she wants to do another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know if we're going to do another one. I wouldn't mind.
Did she get into your head tonight, sir?
Polls are indicating that we got 90%, 60%, 72%, 71%, and 89%. So the polls are very good, but beyond the polls, I felt very good. I had a good time doing it. I hate to speak about our country so negatively, but that's what happened. They've ruined our country. They've destroyed our country. So I hope you're all having a good time, but it was a very interesting evening. Yeah, go ahead.
So confident you won tonight. Why are you here? Why not let the performance speak for itself?
Well, I think it did. When people said, would I come here? And I made an obligation to a couple of people that I'm going to do their show. But it was I thought it was a great night.
Mr. President, Mr. President, you talked.
I have no idea.
Mr. President, when Republicans are complaining about moderators, does that mean that it wasn't a good night? Were you not prepared?
No, I think the moderators were very unfair, but it basically was 3-on-1. But I thought they were very unfair, the moderators. Everybody did. But despite that, they're saying that the debate was a big deal.
Were you prepared for that kind of debate?
Yeah, I assume the moderators would be bad because that right there is the worst of all the news networks, in my opinion, and it always has been. Yeah.
Why won't you commit to a second debate with Kamala Harris?
She wants a second debate because she lost tonight very badly. So they immediately called for a second debate because they lost. So we'll, think about that. But she immediately called for a second. Look, we're looking at polls. We're looking at polls. The worst poll that we've had was 71 that I see. 71% to like 24 or 25. We'll look at it.
All right, Whit. So if you still have me, he's walked a little bit away from our camera. Now he's at the edge there. You won't be able to hear him well. But one of the things you did hear was a question just asked by our Catherine Faulders asking, why not commit to another debate if you believe that you won? He said he believes he won this debate. But then he was also asked, why be here in the spin room spinning about this debate if it's a debate that you believe was a clean win? We're going to try to get you as close as we can to Donald Trump, but I don't think you're going to be able to hear. Let me try to get my mic in there and see if you can hear Whit if you're still going through my camera here.
Yeah, we're listening. Let's see what we can hear.
I thought it was my best debate. I thought I had great debates. I thought this was my best debate. Well, I thought she was not very good tonight. She didn't protect the vice president. He's, the office of the vice president. And certainly, if you take a look at it, she was terrible with respect to the president. She's trying to get herself away from Biden, and she wasn't able to do that tonight. I think it was a big thing. They wanted to disassociate with Biden, and they weren't able to do it. What do you think about it?
Mr. President.
What have I done with it? Yeah, I have nothing to do with Project 20. What do you think of the moderators' sacrifices throughout the debate? I think the moderators were very unfair. I actually thought they were just
All right. So, Whit, if I could just tell you what we're seeing, because it's probably still hard to hear him. Donald Trump has entered the spin room. He's gaggled with reporters. He came over to our camera just a few moments ago, and now he's walked over to the corner there to another section of the gaggle here. It's hard to see him. I'm going to try to keep the camera on Donald Trump as much as we can, although there's a sea of heads to get in here. Here he comes, Whit. Hold on.
Mr. President, over here, Mr. President.
He's going over there.
Andrea's got him.
So if you can see, that's the back of his head. He's walked into the spin room. This was an unannounced visit. Whit. He has said numerous things about the debate, the top line being that he believes that he won. He talked about polls that we're not certain of where they exactly came from as showing him up in the race. But point being is Donald Trump has made this unscheduled appearance here to the spin room to say that he won. But he got asked the question, why be here in the spin room if you believe this was a clean win? And he didn't really fully answer that.
All right, Jay, forgive me as we're following everything. Former President Trump right there in the spin room. We are going to step away from this just for a second. We'll come back if anything happens. But we want to talk to our Republican and Democratic strategists, Reince Priebus and Donna Brazile, to get their reaction to everything that's happening. I'm sure there's no surprise to you that he came here to the spin room, wanted to take over and be the center of the floor. But Donna Brazile, let's start with you because obviously this was a big moment for both candidates, a pivotal moment. Donald Trump says that he won the debate and that Kamala Harris lost badly. How do you see it tonight?
Once again, the president of the United States, the former president, is once again just making it up as he go along. Look, I've never seen a candidate walk into a spin room to try to control the conversation when he fumbled, when he wasn't able to deliver. He ran it. He went back to his rally notes. He had nothing to offer the American people. And even when he got a second bite at the apple, something he didn't even deserve in the conversation, he brought us back to his dangerous, distorted realm of being. It was pitiful to watch him. Look, I thought the vice president gave a solid performance. She showed the American people tonight that she has the vision to lead this country. She wants to unite this country. She talked about lowering costs. She talked about what they are doing now and what she plans to do in the future. So I think the vice president should be proud of her performance tonight. She knows she has a lot of work to do. She got to get more people, to rally and to support her candidacy. So you see the former president out there trying to get the media to pay attention to him. The vice president said, let's pay attention to the American people. They deserve better.
Let's bring in Reince Priebus because Reince, earlier this evening when we were talking before the debate, the recommendation that you gave or the advice that you said that you would give the former president was for him to not take the bait and to stay focused on the issues. There were a few moments there when Kamala Harris was able to get under his skin, specifically when she was talking about crowd sizes and things like that. How do you think the former president did?
Well, I think she did get under his skin a few times. I mean, that's obvious. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think Donald Trump's numbers change at all. And the big mistake that Kamala Harris made is she didn't address head on the biggest issue in the race, which is the economy, the cost of living. She had nothing to say on immigration. She had no answer when she was asked about defunding the police. She had nothing to say about the families that were lost in Afghanistan. So I think those are opportunities lost. I do think that the President Trump anyway, closed very well when he said, look, you work in the White House every day and you talk about the things that you want to do. Why don't you do the things now that you work in the White House? And so I thought that was a strong ending. Whether or not anyone was moved tonight is another story, because I don't think Trump's numbers move. And I actually don't think Kamala Harris addressed the most important issues in the race. Getting Trump mad about crowd sizes and all these other things, it's not going to move any voters at all.
Reince Priebus, Donna Brazile, thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, we do want to bring in Tulsi Gabbard, former Congresswoman and Trump campaign advisor. She's joining us here in the spin room. And Tulsi, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
You have a unique perspective here because not only have you debated against Kamala Harris, but you were once a Democrat. Now you support former President Trump and you helped him with some of his debate prep. How do you think the evening went? And did you see some of the things that you discussed before the debate play out in real time tonight?
President Trump kept this debate very focused on the issues that matter most to the American people. And I think, to me, when you look at this debate, that was the biggest contrast, is that President Trump really brought voice to the American people who are concerned about crime on their streets, who are concerned about millions of illegal immigrants crossing the border, and how this doesn't just affect the border communities. This is affecting, in a very negative way, communities all across the country. He kept coming back to these issues. He kept coming back to the economy and how more and more Americans are continuing to struggle to afford basic necessities, groceries, gas, supplies, things that they are reminded of every single day day that their dollar is going shorter and shorter. It doesn't go as far as it used to be. These are the issues that the American people are most concerned about. And quite frankly, that Kamala Harris not only didn't really speak to or address, but she also didn't recognize and admit the fact that people are in this position today, given the Biden-Harris administration's policies, and that they have been the ones in the White House these past 4 years, not Donald Trump.
So you talked about immigration and the economy. Those are two issues that voters have trusted, at least in the polling shows they trust Trump a bit more. But one area where he's been vulnerable has been abortion. And we heard from Nikki Haley earlier. She suggested that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance need to change the way they speak about women. Tonight, there were some heated exchanges over the issue of abortion. Trump himself has struggled to sort of define where he stands right now. How do you think he handled that part of the debate?
I think he clarified and told the truth about a lot of things that Kamala Harris accused him of that were outright lies. She was trying to tell the American people that he supports a federal abortion ban. He does not. She tried to tell the American people that he's trying to ban IVF, something that's personal to me because it's something that my husband and I, for years, tried to start our own family through the use of IVF. It didn't work out for us, works out for a lot of families. President Trump was quick on the draw when that Alabama court ruled, and he immediately said, no, we have to protect IVF, and the Alabama state legislature took action. She continued to say things. She's trying to say he's trying to ban birth control. That is also 100% false. So President Trump, I think, did a good job in clarifying the truth after Kamala Harris continued to lob lie after lie at him, saying things that he stood for that frankly just are not true.
Well, the former president made some false claims, too. He said that, there were states that wanted to kill babies after they were born. We fact-checked that a bunch of times, even prior to the debate. There is not a single state in this country that would allow that sort of thing. But I want to ask you about something else. He also made a pretty serious allegation saying that he took a bullet to the head because of the way Democrats, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, have been talking about him, saying that he's a threat to democracy. You're a former Democrat. Do you think that Democrats are to blame, at least in part, for that assassination attempt? And remember, the FBI says they don't know what the motive was in that attack.
There is no doubt in my mind that those who use such insightful rhetoric as calling Donald Trump the same as our modern day Hitler, not once, not twice, but year after year after year after year, it doesn't take it shouldn't take an FBI investigator to add 1 + 1 = 2. People always say, well, what would you have done if you were in a position where you could have stopped Hitler back during World War II? To think that any person watching them call Donald Trump today's modern day Hitler wouldn't take it upon themselves to say, hey, maybe I should be that hero to go and take out this man who these people I see on television, who these powerful people in Washington are saying is our modern day Hitler, then you're not actually living in the real world. There are consequences to using that dangerous, insightful rhetoric, and it would not surprise me to know that it would lead to that very dangerous and tragic situation.
Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thank you for your time.
Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. Let's head out to, we're going to talk more on the issue of immigration right now. Go to ABC News contributor Maria Elena Salinas and ABC News national correspondent Maria Villarreal, who is at the border in El Paso right now. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. So from the start of the debate here, former President Trump attacked the Biden administration's policies on immigration. Let's take a listen to at least some of those exchanges.
They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous.
Maria, let's start with you because we heard Trump there repeating some claims about a flood of people coming from prisons, jails, mental institutions, stealing American jobs. What should voters know about these claims?
Listen, we talked about this in the pre-show, that this would be his fallback because he feels very confident when he talks about immigration, very supported. But there is some issue, some concern with this, because a lot of what he talks about are spins on exactly what the truth might be. So, for example, yes, we've had some record numbers during the Biden administration of encounters with migrants at the border. However, that does not mean that they are coming from mental health institutions and prisons. In fact, there there are no facts that actually prove that statement that he has continued to say. Some other points that definitely stuck out to me. Again, we've heard a lot of people referencing the comment he made from Ohio and how migrants are stealing pets and eating them. Again, we've had a number of people fact check that, and it is not true. I mean, and then the biggest one for us is when he talks about the influence of the presidential election and how migrants are being shipped to the United States in order for them to vote. Look, it is very clear there are laws on the books that say already that you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote. If you vote illegally, you will go to jail. So those laws are already in the books. So yes, while we did hear Trump talk a lot about immigration, we didn't really hear a lot of truth here. On the other side of it, I do want to point out that every time Kamala Harris was asked about immigration, we didn't hear what voters have continued to say they need. They wanted policy, they wanted facts, they wanted strategy for the future. I just don't think that we heard that from either candidate tonight on this particular issue, which is very big for voters.
And Maria Elena, let's bring you into this conversation. Recent polls suggest voters do trust Donald Trump over Kamala Harris on the issue of immigration. We've talked about that. Did Vice President Harris do an effective job outlining how her policies would be different from Biden's? She's trying to walk a fine line here, being a supportive vice president while also being a candidate that she says about the future.
Right. Vice President Harris did not really talk much about immigration other than to accuse former President Trump of killing the bipartisan bill by convincing Republicans to simply not vote for it or not put it out on the floor. And what she did say was that she would sign that bipartisan bill once it was approved by Congress and would turn it into law. Of course, this is a bill that would limit the amount of migrants that could enter the country and put more agents at the border. But let me just say that it seems as if President Trump is running on demonizing immigrants and creating fear that they are criminals, killing Americans and eating cats and dogs, like Mireya mentioned. But on the issues that Latinos really care about most, the economy, the high cost of housing, she did spell out what she would do to improve living conditions, at least somewhat. And former President Trump, on the other hand, didn't really give any specifics other than saying that the economy under him would be bigger and better and that he would impose tariffs on foreign countries. So when it comes to the issues that Latino voters care about, there seem to be more specifics from VP Harris than from former President Trump. I think a lot of Latino voters out there would have liked to hear more on what Kamala Harris plans to do, and if she really is going to implement that double approach, which is tough on the border, but at the same time, be humane when it comes to immigrants that are already living in this country and have families. So that, I think, part is pending.
We'll stand by to hear more as the campaign continues. Maria Elena Salinas and Maria Villarreal, thanks to you both. And as we mentioned earlier, the economy, of course, one of the major points of interest for tonight's debate. So here to discuss more on that and how the candidates did on that issue, Elizabeth Schulze is joining us. So Elizabeth, what answers on the economy specifically stood out to you the most?
Well, and wait, the very first question of the debate was on the economy. Vice President Harris was asked if she believes Americans are better off now than they were 4 years ago. And frankly, as you pointed out, she didn't answer the question. She instead pivoted to talk about, in broad brushstrokes, some of the policies that she's highlighting: small business tax credits, down payment assistance for home buyers, an expanded child tax credit. And notably, some of the policies she highlighted on the economy front, were distinct from what we've seen under President Biden. She is really trying to distance herself in some ways from President Biden's economic record, because we know that this has been a liability for the Biden administration. At times, we did see former President Trump attack the Biden administration, and including Vice President Harris's record on the economy. He also doubled down on his plan for more tariffs. But I was also struck with that former President Trump did not go after Vice President Harris more on the issue of inflation. This is one that we know he leads on, he has an edge on, and at times he started going there, but then got sidetracked by some of those personal attacks. When you talk to voters, what they want to know is the answer to that question. They want to answer, are they better off financially now than they were 4 years ago? And will they be better off in 4 years too?
And Elizabeth, also, we mentioned that ABC News Ipsos polling earlier that said that voters trusted Donald Trump's ability to handle the economy more than they did for Vice President Harris. How would you grade each of them making their cases today? I mean, you gave us a little bit of a breakdown there, but specifically, I think a lot of voters wanted and were eager for more specifics. Did we get that tonight?
If we're trying to give a grade on specifics from either candidate, we did not get that at all. Poor, even failing grade on the policy specific front. In fact, much more of this was about presenting this vision from the future for the future from both sides. So we heard Vice President Harris talk about the opportunity economy. She didn't get into a lot of the details about how some of those proposals, for example, would be paid for. On the other hand, we heard former President Trump really tout his own economic record, but he also ignored the fact that a lot of his policies have questions about how they'll be paid for. I mean, just broadly speaking, Whit, not a lot of mention on taxes when we know that that is a big issue for voters and will be a huge issue here in Washington next year. Both of them tried to talk about the economy in broad brushstrokes, but did not get into a lot of those specifics. The voters, when you ask them, they want to know, what is the government, what is the president going to do for me?
Yeah, no taxes on tips. Remember, both candidates were talking about that, and yet tonight we heard almost nothing about it. So exactly. Elizabeth, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, we showed you Donald Trump earlier here in the spin room following the debate, and while he was here with us, Kamala Harris attended a debate watch party talking to supporters. Here is part of what she had to say.
We got some work to do because, listen, I think that we think today was a good day, and it kind of was. But we have 56 days to go, and guys, we're still the underdogs in this race. It's tight. We have got to win Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania.
Of course, Pennsylvania, a critical state, could be make or break, especially for Kamala Harris. Joining us now with more is Terry Moran. Terry, give us some context on what we saw here tonight. Trump again said, quote, talking about abortion, for example, that every legal scholar, every Democrat wanted abortion to be a matter for the states. Now, obviously, we know that that's not true, but who is he speaking to when he continues to say that?
Was trying to reassure voters. Look, he's a very savvy politician, and he knows that this issue has been demonstrated, as he said tonight, in state after state, to be a problem for Republicans. So he's trying to distance himself from what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe versus Wade. And the best formula that he can come up with is that now people get to vote on it state by state, that's what everybody wanted. He's smart enough to, and a good enough politician to know people want to have a say in their future. The problem is, and the counterattack from Kamala Harris was very effective, yet this is an issue, far from Roe versus Wade being unpopular, almost 2/3 of Americans, sometimes polls showed almost up to 70% of Americans supported Roe versus Wade. It's hard to get 70% of Americans to agree on anything. And yet Roe versus Wade was supported. They felt that this was a settlement they could live with. The Republican Party, of course, very different. And now he's stuck with it. And he's trying to find a way to get out of it by saying, well, everybody wanted Roe versus Wade overturned, and now everybody's happy that they're voting about it. Polls show that's not true.
Terry, what about the issue of election integrity? Again, the former president would not acknowledge that he lost the 2020 election, also saying that, when he was pressed multiple times from David Muir on whether he had any regrets about January 6th, he said, no, he had nothing to do with it. What do you think voters are going to make of that as they head to vote once again in November?
With that's really an issue that's baked in. Donald Trump has successfully, in the Republican Party, cemented the notion that there was something wrong with the 2020 election. He believes it was completely stolen, and there are lots of people who believe utter fabrications about mules and stolen votes and things like that. None of that evidence ever held up in any court of law, and it wasn't just because Trump was judged not to have standing. It's because judges looked at the evidence. Trump asked the Attorney General of the United States to order every single U.S. attorney in every single district in America to look for evidence of voter voter fraud. They came back, they said there isn't any. Okay, but what he's trying to do is that in some way that should be rejected. Now his allies say, well, some of the COVID changes to voting practices in the states operated as disadvantaging Republicans, and so that you can reject the election for. But really with Trump, why is a mystery. It's deep in his psychology that he simply cannot acknowledge that he lost.
Terry Moran for us. We always appreciate your perspective. Thank you. Let's go ahead and head over to our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang. Selena, you've been on the floor here in the spin room and recently spoke with California Governor Gavin Newsom. We heard Donald Trump here saying that he won the debate and Kamala Harris lost badly. I'm assuming the California governor had a very different perspective.
Yeah, well, you're right on that way. And Newsom has known Harris for decades. He says that the version of Vice President Harris we saw on the debate stage today is the one that he has known all of these years, strong and commanding and calm. But really, of course, this comes down to the voters. And voters consistently say they want the candidate who's going to bring about the most change. Gavin Newsom believes that Harris delivered that and that this debate did move the needle when it comes to those critical undecided voters and those battleground states. Take a listen to what else the governor told me.
It was a terrible night for Donald Trump. It was a great night for freedom and for democracy, liberty, the rule of law, and Kamala Harris.
So did she successfully get under Donald Trump's skin?
It was, I mean, across the board, consistently. Crowd size, he starts talking about dogs and crowd size again, somehow blaming Nancy Pelosi for January 6th. He was consistent with his past, which is unhinged on the issue, offered no compelling vision for the future, talked about himself, didn't talk about you. She consistently talked about you, me, the future of this country, and talked about things the American people care about.
And with Governor Newsom, they're referring to some of the false claims that Trump had made, including those inaccurate statements about that Ohio town, claiming falsely that they were stealing and eating their neighbors' pets. And Newsom and other Harris surrogates believe that Harris did exactly what she needed to do to confront the outlandish lies, to bring them to the fore, but also not get dragged down into any rabbit holes and bring it back to her message about the future.
Selena Wang, thank you. Let's turn over to, for more on this, we want to bring in our White House correspondent, Mary Alice Parks. And Mary Alice, I'm excited to speak with you because you were actually in the room. There were few journalists allowed inside, so you were there. What were the things that stood out to you?
Yeah, when I was really honored. I was one of just a few journalists, like you said, that actually got to be in the room. I will tell you one that stood out right off the bat, the way that the vice president walked across that stage, really owned the stage by offering her hand in that handshake. She seemed to want to present herself as bigger in that moment, not only offering a handshake, sort of a peace offering in that way, but also really to own the physical space. It was interesting to watch her throughout the night. She moved around her podium quite often, turning to look at the former president, back to camera, folding her hands, unfolding her hands, making many facial expressions as he spoke. Very different from the former president. He directed all of his attention straight into that camera, hardly ever, if ever, glanced across at her. And of course, viewers looking at every single bit of their interactions, their body language, their style, as well as their substance wit.
And important to remember, this was the very first time the two of them have actually met in person. So it was quite a moment. Mary Alice Parks, thank you. Well, that is our show for tonight. I'm Whit Johnson here in the spin room of the first and potentially the only debate between Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. We'll see. They're already talking about the possibility of another. But what a night it was. Thank you so much for joining us here all evening long. ABC News Live is here for you all night with the latest news, context, and analysis. You can always find us on Disney+, Hulu, Roku, and wherever you might stream. Keep it right here on ABC News Live. Have a great night.
Cheddar Bay 2024 is here to clean up the crumbs. Come in now for a chance to win.
To the future of our family.